Yes.
Okay, with Cecil Harris, White Chocolate is the winning screenplay. It is a crime sports film. I guess that's the best way to describe it, correct?
Yes, that's the best way.
So you, before we get into your script, you like it's a sports film, but you're in this like you're a sports reporter, correct?
I started as a sports journalist covering a variety of sports, including hockey, the Carolina Hurricanes of the NHL, and the New York Rangers and New York Islanders, and covered baseball as well, the New York Yankees, basketball, the Indiana Pacers. So I wanted to incorporate sports into the screenplay, but it's mainly about the themes of ambition, identity, and how someone very young responds to various social pressure and what happens when someone who is already close to him and his family has negative motives, negative reasons to really be a central player in that person's life and the implications of that. And also, the crime element comes into play because a Latina detective, who is really the protagonist, has to solve this crime. And she's a single mother herself, very close to her son. So she really empathizes with the mother of the basketball prodigy who was killed. And I basically want to take the viewer once this script is made through that journey of what happens to an entire community when someone whose hopes and dreams were held by so many people who are sort of living vicariously through him, or those who wanted something from him, when that character is taken away, what that does to a family, a community, and even the law enforcement agents who are, yeah, have to solve this murder.
Yeah. So it's like there people are like hitching when someone's like a prodigy of any kind, like sports, they hitch on these people's like it's like they're hitching on these these people's wagons, right? Because they see millions in their future, I guess, right?
Exactly. The character in this case is Chris Sincata, but I could just imagine a young Connor McDavid coming up and all the people from his
Oh,
home.
you're using the hockey reference. Wow, okay.
Yeah, I mean, what was it like for all the people in his hometown who knew he was going to be a superstar and wanted
Yeah.
to get as close to him as possible if they weren't already? And those who were close to him, maybe they want a little more, and
Yeah.
the problems that can result from that.
Yeah, we when I was growing up, I played basketball with a gentleman named Greg Newton, who went on to Duke, and he was supposed to be the next Christian Leitner. So he
Mm.
was in the same high school. It didn't work out for him, but I saw that kind of like it was so weird even talking to him, right? Because he was a he was a different person when the fame came his way, right?
It,
Because he didn't trust anybody. He didn't know like who had an ulterior motive, and everybody kind of treated him differently. Soon as the fame came, everybody was treating him. And I was treating him differently because it was just part of when you're a teenager, right? But it's part of like just the reaction too, right? So I get your script.
Yeah, it's so true. And I've written four books on sports history. Two deal with tennis, and I was thinking of the Williams sisters, Venus and Serena, while I was working on that because as teenagers, they
Yeah,
both became multimillionaires, coming from very humble beginnings. And it was because of the strength of their family unit that neither of them went crazy. They both held it together and had phenomenal careers, especially Serena. But what if there were the wrong elements around them? People just wanting to see them as commodities
yeah,
they could make money off, and people who were friends want to get closer, but you don't necessarily have the best people around you. Then everything can just go off the rails. It didn't with the Williams sisters, but in my character, the basketball prodigy in White Chocolate, things go off the rails, and unwittingly he is to blame because he's very influenced by other people around him instead of really having the family unit or the personal strength to say, I don't want to let other people dictate who I am, determine what my choices will be. But that's a very hard thing for a teenager to do.
yeah. Well, yeah, because your the emotional maturity isn't there yet.
That's right.
It
That's right.
shows you how amazing LeBron James is now, right? Doesn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. Came up from let's say Akron, Ohio, a single
Single
mom
mom,
living in
right?
a housing development, really was poor, but
Yeah.
had this phenomenal talent. Yet he was able to stay on the straight and narrow, and turn pro right out of high school. And today at 40,
Yeah.
LeBron James is a billionaire. It could have gone completely wrong.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's but like even like he's only like I read his book recently. He made one mistake, which was the what do you call it? The in 2011 when he went to Miami. The
Yeah, wait,
decision, sorry.
the
The
decision
decision was
looking at
one he's made one error in 20 years.
yeah, it turned a lot of people against him. But
Yeah.
as you, I mean, if you're really into basketball, you know he spent 4 years in Miami. They made it to the NBA Finals
Every
all
year.
4 years, and he
Yeah.
won two championships. So professionally, it was a good move for him. But the way he handled it turned a lot of people
Yeah.
against him. And I still hear from people to this day, even though he's 40 now and with the Lakers and NBA's all-time leading scorer, he has so many accolades. A lot of people still reflect back to the decision and how he handled it on a
Yeah.
nationally televised shows
Well,
of just doing it.
he went back to Cleveland and he got him a championship. It's like he made his men like in amazing fashion. I think it's one of the greatest teams of all time. I think that people should say he made one mistake, but anyways. Just to talk to your character, like you see these teenagers, and they're from certain environments, and they don't have that. It's like the extreme of like Aaron Hernandez is one extreme, LeBron James is the other extreme, right?
That's
Where
right.
like, but it can so go off the rails, and if you don't have people who love you and around you and are just taking advantage of you, you're not going to make it, right? So
That's right. That's right. And the Kristen Cotta character in White Chocolate, raised by a single mom who did her best. She held that family together, running a business, two sons, but there wasn't a father figure in the picture. But his godfather tried to become the father figure, but that guy had serious issues, and the script brings out how that can have a negative effect on someone. I'll just mention that as a high school senior, uh, Chris Sincata was driving a Cadillac Escalade.
yeah. He wasn't getting any money. Yeah. 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 And
Now,
that's a thing too, right? That
yeah,
corruption. It's just you get corrupt so young, and you can't, and you're going to take the money. Well, why wouldn't you, right? So
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. I come back again to the example of the Williams sisters, who as teenagers were multi-millionaires and
Yeah.
champions, but their parents really kept them on the right track, and they just didn't go off the rails.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to go off the rails because, again, if you're so young and you have so much money, you can literally buy anything you want. Um, Things can go horribly wrong. It didn't with LeBron, but it has gone wrong with so many others who we thought would become um, global superstars, and it just didn't happen.
Yeah, there's for every LeBron James, there's 1,000 people that didn't make it, right? So that's what happens to even if they get a scholarship to university, it doesn't guarantee a thing, right? So
Right, that's right. And nowadays, with name, image, and likeness deals at major universities, we're talking about someone just out of high school, a highly sought after first year player in basketball or football. Mainly, those are the two sports where the players are making a lot of money
yeah,
going to a certain college. It can corrupt you. There's no question about it. It's gone are the days when you had to play 3 or 4 years at least in college before you could go turn pro and make millions. Now, a college freshman can come in making millions of dollars because of the way the rules have changed. And that
well,
can
I think it's a good thing that they were making billions of dollars. They should get a piece of the pie, right? So
yeah, I agree. They should get
yeah,
paid, absolutely. But we're having this phenomenon now, especially in college football and college basketball, where players at the end of the season they go into the transfer portal and
yeah,
see where they can get more money.
yeah. Well, listen, man, it's capitalism. That's what America's about, right? So
Yeah, true, true.
okay, so then, but your main character in your script is Erica, who's
Yeah,
a very interesting character, the detective. She's a single mom. Her dad died, was a cop, like she's second generation cop. Her son's father's in prison, right?
yeah. Well, yes, as the story unfolds, Erica's son's father, Ramon, gets out of prison and tries to incorporate himself back into her life, but
Yeah,
she has outgrown him. When Erika became pregnant with the son Enrique, um, Ramon cheated on her, found another girlfriend. So that forced Erika to have to raise the child by herself while in a demanding job, a police officer, a male dominated profession. She happens to be a beautiful woman, so she's dealing with men hitting on her all the time, men looking at her all the time, and rumors about, oh, well, she must be sleeping her way to the top because she's in her early 30s and she's a detective. So it doesn't always take into account the talent that a woman has in a male dominated profession, the hard work required to rise up the ranks in a male dominated profession. So that's another theme in the screenplay, how Erika has to navigate that world where so many people are looking at her as something, as someone they want to possess, but they don't always respect her.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really good script. And then there's obviously the who done it kind of concept. What happens next? Like how what kind of like while you're talking about this drama that we're talking about and these like thematics in your scripts, there's still that thorough line kind of story plot points where like, okay, what happened here? Why this person die? Right. So
But yeah, I wanted to have a lot of gray areas there, so it's not so easy to figure out who done it. People have to really stay with it, and I want to show how detectives go about their business and finding out what actually happened and why. Of course, I won't give it away, but it's a journey that I want people to come on with me and see it through the eyes of this Latina detective who you know, she had to deal with sexual harassment from the commissioner of the police force. So she's had to overcome a lot while she and her male partner, who basically is someone who always respects her, they work well together as a team, but it's a really tough case to crack because I make it deliberately unclear as to who did it. So they have to go through a lot of people, a lot of interviews, a lot of procedural work. Many people they have to interview a first, a second, sometimes a third time to piece it all together.
okay, so it's a great script and hopefully and but you started as a writer, like you said, we touched in the beginning, you're a sports reporter, and
Yep.
then you also wrote on a couple like a few books. You wrote four books,
Four,
and
yeah.
now you're writing screenplays. So what kind of motivated you to get into screenwriting after your prosperous career so far?
It's interesting. I've always enjoyed movies and I'm fascinated by who writes them. I mean, I watch the Oscars every year, and my favorite category is usually best original screenplay, best adapted screenplay, because I want to find out who wrote these these works.
Yeah.
And I remember when American Fiction won the screenplay. It's about an author who basically could not find his audience, so he decided to write a stereotypical book about Black people, and it just sold like hotcakes, right?
Yeah.
And when he was writing his serious works, he couldn't find an audience and didn't have a lot of support from his publisher. That script affected me to the point where I decided, well, I want to try screenwriting because my first book was a hockey book. Second was a baseball book. My last two were tennis books. And I don't believe they sold as well as I wanted them to. So I said, let me try a different medium. I like movies. I'm fascinated by screenwriting. So I started buying screenplays of classic movies like um, Taxi Driver, Jaws, uh, Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing,
Mhm.
and reading them and getting a feel for the format. And I'm still a work in progress as a screenwriter, but I'm enjoying this transition and being able to tell stories in a different way.
So you wrote the other screenplay was called Iceman, and it's about black hockey trailblazer
That's right.
in the mid '90s, I guess, National Hockey League, right? So it's
Yeah.
still, there's you don't. It's very rare to see black. It's going to change in the
Mhm.
next generation. I got some theories because I live in a certain hockey environment. So you're seeing minorities playing hockey now, like especially the Asians are a lot of Asians are playing hockey now. So the next 15 years, you're going to see a lot of Asians in the NHL and a lot of blacks and like like more black people in the NHL as well, right? So
That's right. That's right. I'm also in a documentary called Black Ice, which is basically a history of blacks in hockey, going back to the Colored Hockey League of the Maritimes in Canada in the 1920s, basically, to players like Willie O'Ree, who was the first black player in the NHL, Herb Carnegie, who should have been the first black player in the NHL in the 1940s, but
Yeah,
he got low ball offers from the New York Rangers that he didn't sign, so he stayed in Canadian junior hockey to the present day, where you have a lot of black players in the league who are playing prominent roles. And when I worked on my first book, that was the year Jarome Iginla was voted most valuable player in the NHL. Black player, was the captain of the Calgary Flames at the time, and I got to know him pretty well. And in talking to people like Jarome Iginla, Anson Carter, Grant Fuhr, and hearing their stories, it's something that I said one day I'd like to do something like that. And then my first book, Breaking the Ice, came out. So when I worked on the screenplay Iceman, the lead character is sort of a composite of these black
gotcha.
hockey players that
Yeah.
I got to know when I was covering the sport full time.
Yeah, and well, there's in like is like I guess you have to be in a certain environment to play hockey, right? And then the problem with hockey is that it's too expensive. Like,
Yes,
right? You have to be rich to play hockey, right? So that's the problem with the sport. For a very socialistic liberal country, it's got the most kind of expensive game to play in the world, right? So
right. I mean, when I covered the Carolina Hurricanes, I lived in Raleigh, North Carolina, and there was really just one ice rink in that area, and
yeah,
figure skaters and hockey players were sort of fighting over it. So how do you develop the skills if you don't have ice? How do you afford the equipment? You know, how do
yeah.
you get to be with, say, a traveling team where you're playing, some of the best players in the region? I mean, it's hard to come out of a place like Raleigh, North Carolina, where I cover the Hurricanes, and become a professional hockey player. You don't have enough exposure to the sport where you can learn to play it and afford the equipment. And as you get older, get new sticks and helmets and gloves and everything, skates and everything you
Yeah.
need. It's hard to do if you're in a lot of parts of the United States, certainly.
Well, even Mark Messier in his book, I don't know if you read it. It's a good book, by the way. But he talked about even New York City. Like there's no sheets, he calls it sheets, right? Like
Right.
there's no ice rinks for kids to play in New York City.
That's right. I mean, I happen to be in Yonkers, New York, and there's an ice rink here, but it's mainly used by figure skaters. And there's
Yeah.
another rink in a neighboring town of Mount Vernon called the Ice House, and that's where a lot of hockey is played. But that's the only place. It's not enough. And Mark Messier is absolutely right. I mean, and that's one thing that has to change. I mean, the problems are, say, geography, economics, and also social pressure. A lot of black kids and former NHL
Yeah.
star Tony McKegney told me this because it happened to him when he was coming up, and it happened to his son. If you're the only black player on the team and your other black friends are doing other things, sometimes
Yeah.
it's not fun for you.
I talked to a guy who's like a father kind of in the neighborhood, and he's Korean, and he played hockey, and he said that he was always the only Korean, only like Asian person on his team, and he used to get racist like calls during the games, and it had actually kind of messed him up. He said even in his adulthood because he got this
Yeah,
anger kind of like set him up like because he loved hockey so much, but he realized that like it wasn't fun most of the time, right? Because he just described, right? So
yeah, and the documentary that I'm in is one of the Talking Heads. Black Ice really brings it out for a lot of pro players who persevered, or those who quit the sport because they couldn't deal with
yeah,
the abuse. I mean, it's hard to deal with that. Other players can just go out there and play, but if you're black in a predominantly white sport, it's very hard to just focus on the game. And that's
yeah,
one thing that will, I think, eventually change, as you said, as more black players, Asian players, uh, Latino players. I mean, there's a franchise.
yeah,
I mean, there's franchises in three in California, and more Latinos that they're playing. And it's too bad the Arizona franchise moved to Utah.
yeah.
there, as more black players come into the sport, it'll be easier for them because they won't stick out so much. They won't feel like, you know, I mean, as a black sports writer, I would hear people say, what are you doing here in the press box?
Yeah. It is kind of a racist game. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's
yeah. I covered a
interesting.
game in Montreal one day, and the head of security at it was the Molson Center then. I'm not sure what the corporate name is now, but it was the Molson Center then. And he came over to me and said, there are
In
20,
Montreal?
yeah, Montreal with the
Yeah.
Canadian thing. Molson Center then. I'm not sure if that's still.
Yeah, I think it's yeah. But yeah, that's the Montreal, yeah, stadium, yeah.
Yeah, the head of security said, I don't know if you realize this, but there are 23,000 people here tonight, and you're the only black person I see in the arena. I said, well, what do you want me to do?
Yeah,
It's weird.
it's yeah. Like I think hope like you said, even like the analogy I can give is that we didn't like in Canada, Toronto, we didn't have a basketball team until the 90s. And then when Toronto started, the Raptors started winning, now you're seeing these like all these Canadians playing in the NBA now, right? We almost won the gold. We were close to like we should have won the gold medal in the last Olympics, but that tells you because it's because of the Raptors' success. It's shown that hey, look at these guys like me. I'm going to play basketball, and it's like it just makes them more popular, right? So
That's right. And I would think the favorite for MVP in the league this year is the Canadian Shea
yeah,
Gilgeous-Alexander, Oklahoma City Thunder. And I
yeah,
mean, it was about a decade ago when the Raptors won with uh, Kawhi Leonard, right? Is
yeah.
that it?
19. We kind of got lucky with the because Golden State got some injuries, right? So yeah, but we won in 19. Yeah,
Yeah, that was tremendous. And they say that that's the impetus for more kids to want to play.
yeah,
And I noticed that the WNBA will have a Toronto franchise, so that's going to have the same effect for
100%.
girls.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're seeing that, but that's what Batman was hoping for with the NHL, right? With all the franchises in Florida and like, trust me, Canadians are still hate his guts till this day, right? Because of
Right.
it. But
Yeah.
he's in it because there's only one line now. It's a different game, right? I don't know, like if because you guys see you got a Gretzky book behind your left shoulder, right? Is that a Gretzky book?
Oh, that's my first book, Breaking the Ice. That's Anson Carter on the cover, celebrating his goal for Canada when they won the World
Oh,
Championship.
it's funny because it looks like it's like back. It's not in focus, but it looks like Gretzky's kind of pose when he scores a goal. So yeah, there you go. Yeah.
And now Anson's doing TV, working on a set with Wayne Gretzky on TNT here in
Yep.
this.
TNT. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting.
So yeah. So back in the 80s, you had two great lines. Every team had two great lines, right? So, and then you like look at talk about Grand Fury. You had Amy Mogan, Grand Fury had two great goalies. But now it's like it's everything so spread out, right? So even though you got the Europeans coming in, it's totally a different game now, right? Than what I grew up with. So.
Yeah, 30 teams, so the talent really gets spread out, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the league's trying to do something interesting with this Four Nations tournament that's coming up starting next week. United States, Canada, Sweden, and Finland. Instead of an all-star game, they're going to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. It's like this keep the Wales and Campbell conference. Remember those back in the day?
I do. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
what the NBA did. Like, it's like, okay, let's just go back to the East and the West and like forget this crazy like all-star game. Just like go back to the tradition and have some fun, right? So, anyways, I don't know if it's I don't think basically what I'm saying is not gonna work. That's my opinion, right? So
Yeah, the games are in Montreal and Boston. I'll just be interested to see what the ratings are, and
yeah.
I'll tune in just to see about the quality. But they've NHL they've abandoned the whole all-star concept. They're just going to have four nations, and there are so many great Russian players, but because of political reasons, Russia's
Yeah.
not part of this.
Yeah. That's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, like think of Russians in the Detroit, right? Detroit was on like that's how they got their Stanley Cups because of the Russian players, right? So
yeah,
so
yeah.
I have to ask you about. I'm a big baseball fan, so I got to ask you about "Call the Yankees My Daddy," Reflections on Baseball. I've not read. I would like to read the book because I'm curious what it's about because that's like Pedro Martinez's famous line in is it
Right.
03 or 04? Call the
Yeah,
Yankees My Daddy, right?
yeah. It's about growing up a Yankee fan in a Met household in Brooklyn, New York, and then becoming 2 decades later, the Yankees beat writer for Gannett newspapers, and finding out that it's better to have some distance and not have to deal with George Steinbrenner, who was the owner at the time of
What year did you cover the team?
1994 to 1998.
Oh, so you were there, like when
Yeah, I
when
was
the
there.
World
The
Series.
dynasty basically began in 1996. Remember, 1994 was the year there was no World Series because
Yeah,
of the
they were a good team.
And
right?
the Yankees had the best record in the American League. The Montreal Expos had the
Yeah,
best record in the major leagues. So, Montreal never made it to a World Series, but maybe that would have been the year because in August, everything shut down.
yeah,
95 came back, they came back, and that was the first year the Yankees made the playoffs in 14 years.
yeah. They lost
Losing,
against Seattle, right? The
they're
famous
losing
Griffey.
Seattle in the first division series
Yeah.
after being up 2 games to none. And because of that, George Steinbrenner basically fired everybody.
Buck Showalter, right? Like,
That's right. That's
yeah,
right. Good memory. Buck Showalter, his entire staff. They
yeah,
got rid of a lot of key players. Brought in Joe Torre, who had a reputation as an unsuccessful manager. He had already been fired by 3 clubs:
yeah.
Mets, Cardinals, and Braves. But a people person, I got to know him very well as a beat writer covering the team. And the Yankee team in '96, that was the first time Joe Torre had all-star talent to
Yeah.
manage. And he took them all the way. So 96, they won it all. 97 made the playoffs. 98, they won it all. 99 won it all. 2000 won it
They
all.
won it all.
That's really, it's the last dynasty in Major League Baseball. 4 world championships in 5 years.
I'm telling you, I couldn't stand that team. It was like, but it was like I'm a big Jays fan. Obviously, same division, right?
Same
But
division.
it's sort of like they're like the Chiefs of today, right? Like
Yeah.
just the luckiest team. But then again, they were just good. They were good. They were good in the clutch, right? So
It was so good.
I have
Yeah.
perspective on it now, but it was like, but back then I was just like too emotionally involved. It was like they're driving me crazy.
It was amazing to be part of that, to see Derek Jeter break in, to see Mariano Rivera break in. Now they're both Hall of Famers, and clearly Mariano Rivera, best relief pitcher ever. He's got the
Yeah,
numbers. Derek Jeter, one of the best players in Yankee history, and Joe Torre doing such a great job handling 25 egos,
yeah. And
making
George Steinbrenner.
yeah, he had to manage George Steinbrenner. Steinbrenner didn't fire him. Torre just managed as long as he did, and then he left, and now he works for Major League Baseball. But Joe Torre became so popular that Steinbrenner couldn't fire him. There would have been a
Yeah.
big revolt.
Well, they finally did in 2007, right? So,
Yeah, he stepped aside. It
well,
wasn't
he
really
was
like
fired. Let's
getting
be
fired
honest
like
here. Yeah,
Yogi Berra got fired,
yeah.
or you know,
He was fired.
Travolta
Yeah,
got fired.
yeah. No, it
Yeah,
was like a contract, like it was like a BS contract negotiation where he was getting paid like 5 million. They said, we'll pay you $1 million kind of a thing. And it's like,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. They made him an offer he could refuse.
yeah, he was going to refuse. Like it was
Yeah,
totally set up. Yeah, but then like, so yeah. And then, yeah, that was like, that must have been an interesting time because Mario Rivera is like such an interesting guy. I know he's like super religious and like, he just was so good. He was such a great player. And even though, you know what I mean? Like he had the blown save in 2001, but it was like other than that, like he was just flawless, right?
yeah. He was amazing, and he was on the '95 team and had a big moment in Game Five
Yeah,
of the series against Seattle when they brought him out of the bullpen because before that, Buck Showalter really didn't know how to use Mariano Rivera. And I'm not blaming Buck. He was just so young. His English wasn't particularly good at the time. Mariano Rivera had someone from New Rochelle drive him to and from Yankee Stadium because he couldn't figure out the street signs. That's how unfamiliar he was
yeah,
with New York. But eventually, he found his bearings as a person, and he became the greatest relief pitcher with basically one pitch, a cut fastball.
yeah. Oh my God. Well, he played the Jays 19 times a year, right? Like he drove me
Okay.
crazy.
Yeah, yeah. He was the closest thing to automatic I've ever seen as a reliever, and nobody is like him. Nobody's like him now. I mean, everyone stumbles at some point, but you have to go back to the Game 7 of 2001 World Series against Arizona for Mariano Rivera to
Yeah,
have a high-profile failure. Other than that, he was automatic.
yeah, it was great. So that must have been fun. Like day because baseball's every day, right? It's day by day. Must have
Yeah,
been. I know it was a grind. It must be a grind, but it must be fun, kind of covering them.
yeah, it was fun and definitely a grind, but because they opened the clubhouse. The rules are somewhat different now
Yeah,
because of the pandemic, but before the pandemic, the clubhouses had to be open 3.5 hours before every game. So for a 7 o'clock Yankee game, and I'm one of the 8 beat writers covering the team, we all show up at 3:30 so nobody gets beaten on stories.
yeah.
So it's really a
A
long
long day.
day,
Yeah,
and we do
and
it so many times. So,
in
okay.
every Yankee game was like 3.5. Back then was like 3.5 hours, 4 hours long, right? So
That's right. They had guys like Wade Boggs who really would work the count. Derek Jeter was really good at working the
Oh,
count.
O'Neill, right?
Paul O'Neill, yeah, that was the Yankee. Tino Martinez, when he came over from Seattle, was not such a free swinger anymore. He got into that habit. Bernie Williams worked the count,
Yeah.
but it produced a lot of 3.5, 4 hour games, and you've been there all day, and you don't get home until about sometimes 1 or 2 in the morning.
And then Posada would stroll to the mound like three times an inning. Hey, like it was just like, come on.
Yeah,
And of
yeah,
course they changed the rules. It's like, let's get the game going. He
yeah,
wasn't as bad as Veritek on the Red Sox. It was like he
yeah.
was the worst, but it was just like, come on, let's move the game forward, right?
That's right. The baseball realized that it had to do something because these
Yeah.
games were taking too long. But I'm not a fan of the ghost runner. Are you? When it's tied and they go to the
Oh, and
10th, you
yeah.
automatically put somebody at second base. That I don't like that.
Well, it's like my theory is like it's like I'm a fan of it, but not during the playoffs. So it's like the NHL, right?
Right.
You have the over 5 minute overtime. It's the
Hmm.
same kind of analogy. Let's get the game over with. Let's move on. It's a different strategy. It's you know what I mean? But then
Yeah.
when it's the playoffs, you don't do that, right? So you play till you win, right? So
Yeah, it would be too much of a compromise if they did it in the playoffs. And
yeah.
now we have 3 rounds of playoffs. That's another thing that's different. It used to be division series, league championship series, World Series. Now they have this wild card round that not everybody participates in. And I don't know if you noticed, the Yankees were one of the few teams that did not play in the wild card round that still got to the World Series.
Yeah.
Usually teams that are off for a week in a sport where you're used to playing 5 or 6 days
Yeah,
a
I
week.
know.
All of a
Yeah.
sudden you're off for a week. It hurt a lot of teams this year.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, they still got some stuff to figure out. Yeah, 1,000%. But nobody knows how to bunt anymore. So these games with extra innings, it would take the eight to go. I went to a game one time, it was 18 innings
Okay, yeah,
because nobody knew how to bunt, right?
that's right. That's
Yeah.
right. And now with this ghost runner, if you're going to start the half inning with a guy on second base, run him the third with 1 out. Your chances of getting a run are great, but you still see people swing for the fences. When
They
they
don't know
score,
how
you
to.
hit
They
the
yeah.
guy in second. Yeah, they should teach. I wish they teach it.
They don't teach they just teach you free swinging, right? So
That's right. Everyone, the launch angle, the exit velocity,
yeah.
instead of just laying down a bunt or hitting the to the opposite field, especially if you're a right-handed batter, you've got a guy on second. If you
Yeah.
hit a slow ground ball to second, it's as good as a bunt. You've got a guy on third now
Yeah.
with 1 out. And I would say the Tampa Bay Rays do that better than anybody else because
Well,
they
there's
don't
two
have a
things
big payroll.
two things the bunt doesn't do. It doesn't make you money and it doesn't give you get you girls. So that's why people don't do it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I guess it was a commercial that ran a few years ago. Chicks dig the long ball.
Stick the long ball.
A couple of Atlanta Braves pitchers were Greg Maddux and Tom Glavine. Were they the two?
Yeah, yeah, that would those would be the two. Yeah, yeah, back in the day. That's amazing. Well, I would talk to you forever, even like about that, the history of that team, because well, 2008, 2009. So like I said, now I have perspective, right? Maybe I'll have perspective on the Chiefs, maybe not, because I'm a Bills fan. I'm too close. I'm way too close to it. But basically, maybe I will because I love greatness, right? But the '98 Yankees were a phenomenal team, and they were all like kind of like in the system. They weren't like their free agent guys back in the 2000s. They were like all like born and bred teams, and they knew how to play the game. They were a fun watch.
Yeah, they had their core four, as they were known: Derek
Yeah,
Jeter, Andy Pettit, Bernie Williams, Jorge Posada, and they could have thrown in Mariano Rivera. They all came up through the system.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Brocious, and you had right Tino Martinez. You
you know,
had Paul
that's right.
O'Neill, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah,
And for a couple of those teams, 96 and 98, Darryl Strawberry came over from the Mets and had a
Strawberry.
big
Yep.
role for the
Yeah.
Yankees.
David Wells, like former Blue Jay, was your team guy, right? David Cohn.
From the Blue Jays to the Yankees, David Cohn.
Yeah.
The big
Yeah,
trade
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
five.
right. Yeah. All right,
Yeah,
man. Well, congratulations on the script. It was
yeah.
good. It's fantastic. And I wish you the best. And let's talk again when we showcase another script of yours.
Let's do it. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for inviting me on.